So good evening. Welcome to Gonzaga's webinar, How to Apply for Financial Aid and Scholarships. Thank you so much for joining us from all over the US and even the world. My name is Alexa Gasky. I'm an Assistant Director of Admission here at Gonzaga, and I'll be one of your hosts for the webinar. You may have noticed that you are muted and your video is off, and that is so that we can cut out any background noise. This webinar is being recorded and will be posted within the next couple of days to our website for future viewing. But we definitely want to hear from you. We know that there's going to be a lot of questions and we want you to keep asking them throughout the presentation. So please utilize the Q&A function to ask those questions, but also be mindful that as we are recording this and this is going to be public, you do not want to share any personal financial information in that Q&A. We are always happy to work with you one-on-one for some of those more personal questions, and throughout the presentation, we'll be sharing ways to connect with an admission counselor or a financial aid counselor. So keep those questions coming, but definitely don't share any personal financial information. We have several colleagues with us that will introduce and who will be in that Q&A and answering those questions, as well as offering some helpful links in the chat. So from the Office of Admission, I'm joined by Sarah Welchel and Levi Garcia Morales, who will be helping out today. And then I'm going to pass it over to Sarah to introduce herself as well as her financial aid colleagues.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah Everett, and I work in the Student Financial Services office at Gonzaga. That includes financial aid, student accounts, and student employment. I am here with my wonderful financial aid colleagues, Shaylin Sapp and Helen Van Blaricum, who will be helping out in the Q&A with a lot of those more financial aid or FAFSA specific questions. So happy to be here. So I think by virtue of you joining this webinar, we can sort of make some assumptions that you might have some concerns about the cost of college. And I want to kind of start by setting the stage to let you know that you're not alone. Not only are you joined by a bunch of people on this webinar, but when we see survey data from across the country and ask parents what their top concerns about college are, things like affordability consistently top the list. So like the cost of college, how much financial aid or scholarships are available, and potential debt are on most parents' minds especially. But there's something really interesting is that parents often underestimate how much students worry about this too. So whether you're a parent or a student here today, we understand your concerns. Cost is a crucial factor in the college decision process. So that's why before we dive into the details about applying for financial aid, I just want to share that our office's mission and commitment to Gonzaga's broader vision and values. At Gonzaga, we don't just aim to make our education affordable through our generous financial aid programs. We also strive to make the cost and value crystal clear and consistent. We don't want to confuse you with jargon or hide costs in the fine print. Our goal is transparency. And we believe that our approach is really a direct extension of Gonzaga's values. So while in the aid office, we are going to crunch numbers. That's part of what we do, but we're also here to serve you, to educate you, and to help you grow. So we understand that finances can be deeply personal, but it's not just about dollars and cents. It's about, education is your dreams and your future, and sometimes family sacrifices. And we get and respect that and want to honor that as we're working with families. So right off the bat, we're going to say if you leave here with unanswered questions or when new ones inevitably pop up throughout this process, don't hesitate to reach out. We have a super dedicated staff. We're experienced. There's rarely a wait to get a hold of someone, and we really take pride in our commitment to excellent service to students. So with that, we know that financial aid can just be super confusing. And if you take nothing else from this, please know that we want to be a resource for you and we are happy to help. So now we can dig into some of the details. Let's talk about what financial aid is. So the term financial aid is really an all-encompassing term that means, it's funding provided to students and families to help pay for their college expenses. And there's a few goals of financial aid, like the funds themselves and also what financial aid offices do. One of those goals is to distribute limited resources. So unfortunately, there's not like an unlimited pool of dollars that can be awarded to students. So one of the things aid offices do are trying to figure out how best to make those dollars available to many different students. We also have a responsibility to coordinate financial aid from a lot of different sources. We're going to talk about where financial aid dollars come from in a minute, but just know that there's a few different resources that students may have access to through this financial aid process. We also want to make sure that we are awarding aid and evaluating students' financial circumstances in a way that's consistent and equitable. And all of this is in the spirit of helping students realize their goals of attending college, of having choices in which college they attend, as well as having enough funding to complete their degree.
So before we move on to the different types of financial aid, we wanted to highlight some information specific to international students. So for international students who apply through our Gonzaga Global program, there may be differences in the range of scholarships that are awarded to you and eligibility for GU institutional scholarships. For first year and transfer students who apply through our kind of standard or non-Gonzaga Global route, you are eligible for GU institutional scholarships that do not require a FAFSA. So you may also be eligible for some of our application-based scholarships, and you can view that at our website, which is just gonzaga.edu/international, which I'll have one of my colleagues drop in the chat. International students on an F1 student visa are eligible to work on campus, which can be a really important funding source for additional aid, as well as being able to gain some work experience while you are a student. Our International Student and Scholar Services team provides immigration support for F1 students to gain work experience directly related to your field of study while you're a student. So just don't be afraid to reach out and ask those questions. So on that note, we're going to get a little interactive here. We're going to have several polls throughout this webinar. So I'm going to ask my colleague Sarah to launch that first poll for us. So do you plan to work while you are in college? Give you some time to get those responses in. They're coming in hot, which is great. Still getting some in. Okay, awesome. We can probably end it there. And we'll go ahead and share those results. So we've got kind of a mixed bag. A lot of you are saying yes, some of you are saying no, some of you are not sure yet. We'll kind of go into the pros and cons of student employment and some of those resources at Gonzaga.
Thanks, Alexa. So we're going to get to student employment in just a second here, but as you go through the financial aid process, you're going to hear a lot of different ways to describe types of financial aid. And one really important distinction is whether the financial aid you're offered is gift aid or self-help aid. So first, gift aid is just as it sounds. It usually comes in the form of grants and scholarships, and it's money that doesn't need to be repaid. It can also be based on either financial need or merit. Usually financial aid labeled grants are based on financial need, and types based on merit are usually called scholarships, although that's not like a hard and fast rule in every case. And then student employment might be a part of the financial aid offer. As I mentioned, one of the things we do in student financial services is connect students to student employment opportunities. And it's really one of the more frequently asked questions we get in our area is about the student work opportunities on campus. So first, know that work study is a type of financial aid program, and that particular program is based on financial need. But don't be discouraged if you don't see it on your financial aid offer. At Gonzaga, we have many student employment programs and students working on and off campus. There are a lot of really great benefits to working while in college, especially through the student employment programs. Employers and supervisors are really accommodating to student schedules and understand the demands of being a full-time student, and that you might need to take a shift off to study for a test or write a paper and that sort of thing. And not only is working on campus a great opportunity to earn some money, it's also a great way to connect with the campus community and kind of gain some work experience. So maybe stuff to build a resume, but I also think it's a really important developmental opportunity where you get to be thinking about what you do and don't like about certain jobs and different types of work that you have on campus. We have close to 2,000 students already working on campus this semester, and that includes both on and off campus programs and in the need and non-need based programs. So there's lots and lots of opportunities to work, and there's some really good reasons to consider it. Another part or another type of financial aid are student loans. And these are a really integral part of the financial aid system that help make higher ed possible for millions of students. While, of course, we would encourage you to borrow responsibly, loans can serve as a valuable opportunity to make an investment in your future. And when combined with other types of financial aid, it can really help kind of move the needle on what is realistic and affordable. We'll have a little bit more information about loans later on in the presentation, but just know that it is for sure a type of financial aid and will likely be included in your financial aid offer. You also may hear about other types of funding that are going to be probably a little bit more situation specific, but they might be available to you as well. These might include programs like veterans education benefits, a tuition waiver if a parent is employed by a university, or a benefit through a parent's employer, or a discount such as the one that we have for multiple siblings at Gonzaga.
Okay, time for our next poll to get us thinking even more about the financial aid process. Do you plan to submit a FAFSA or the free application for federal student aid? Okay, we are seeing overwhelmingly yes, which is a great answer, and we'll go into the FAFSA and stuff a little bit later. But keep those poll answers coming just for a couple more seconds, and then we will go ahead and stop that and share the results. About 90% of you saying yes, and we love to hear that. Maybe some of you have a no or are not sure yet, and hopefully this webinar will continue to kind of just give more information so that you and your family can make the best decision for you all. So we'll keep going from there.
Thanks, Alexa. Yeah, it seems like we have maybe a few people to change their mind on whether or not to do a FAFSA. Okay, so where does all of the financial aid come from? A variety of sources. So the colleges themselves, schools like Gonzaga, are going to be the biggest source of financial aid for students. And most often these are in the form of grants or scholarships. In the most recent data we have, which is from the 2021-2022 school year, 91% of students at four-year private colleges were receiving some type of financial aid. I think I saw the number, it was around $240 billion. So this is a significant amount of money and the largest source of funding for students. The funding can be based on a variety of factors. Academics is probably a fairly obvious one. It could be other achievements, performance, athletic performance, involvement, and financial need. The next largest source of financial aid is going to be from the federal government or the U.S. Department of Education. The federal programs include things that you might hear about, like the federal Pell Grant, the SEOG grant, federal work study, and federal direct loans. And in Washington State, there are need-based grants for Washington residents attending colleges in Washington. We have a really awesome state grant program. I'm a proud Washingtonian, especially when we have really awesome financial aid programs. And the biggest state grant program in Washington is called the Washington College Grant. College Bound is also part of the Washington State's higher education offerings, as well as some more targeted scholarships for specific populations. And then there's a catch-all category for other sources. So outside scholarships, which we'll share some information on here in a bit. These are scholarships through private organizations, loans from a financial institution like a bank or a credit union, agency funding, such as through the Veterans Administration, or things like parents' employers.
So now shifting and speaking specifically to scholarships, at Gonzaga, the majority of first year and transfer students receive scholarships to help finance their education. A notably high percentage of this aid comes from our merit scholarships and need-based grants. 99% of first year students receive scholarships and or grants, and 93% of transfers receive some sort of institutional aid. Gonzaga first year and transfer applicants are automatically reviewed for merit scholarships, and if accepted, accepted, students receive those merit scholarships in your acceptance packet. Students' merit scholarships will not decrease during their 4 years at Gonzaga, and Gonzaga's 4-year graduation rate is 74%, while the national average typically ranges between 40 to 45% in a given year. Our admission process is test optional, which means that students do not need to submit an SAT or ACT score to be reviewed for admission, and this remains true for merit scholarships. So students without test scores will still remain eligible for merit scholarships, and there will be no disadvantage in that review process. In addition to merit scholarships, Gonzaga offers additional scholarships that students may also be considered for. While most of our scholarships are automatically considered for just by applying, we do have a few scholarships requiring separate applications. To see those lists of scholarships that may require a separate application, you can check our gonzaga.edu/scholarships page. And again, our folks in the chat will be able to put a direct link to that. Outside scholarships, as Sarah mentioned, are scholarships from sources other than Gonzaga. Students bring in about $2 to $3 million annually in outside scholarship, but it's really important to approach this realistically. 97% of outside scholarships are values of $2,000 or less, and most are awarded by organizations that students already have a relationship with. So the best places to look for these outside scholarships would be like in your local community, whether that's booster clubs, Rotary clubs, community organizations, service organizations that you're involved in, like Girl Scouts, parent or student employers, as well as community foundations. We really recommend that you begin your scholarship search at the local level because the application pool is likely to be smaller and thus making yourself a little bit more competitive. Washington State students can really look into the Maxwell Foundation as well as the Independent Colleges of Washington and washboard.org for these opportunities. It's important to note that while outside scholarships can help, they're usually not the magic bullet solution. So focus on organizations you're already connected to for the best chances. Gonzaga's Financial Aid Office maintains an external outside scholarship database, which provides links to several scholarships through private organizations from around the US. These scholarships tend to be larger in the number of applicants, but can still be a great resource in your scholarship search. For families that have multiple ZAG siblings enrolled at the same time or same semester, we do also offer a tuition discount. So the tuition discount provides the older student with a 10% off tuition. If you have a third ZAG on campus, and the oldest would then get 20% off and the middle child would get 10%. So it's a really great opportunity. For students who are military connected, whether you're a student veteran or the dependent of a service member, use of military education benefits is available at Gonzaga. We've highlighted here just a few of the available programs that we utilize for our enrolling students, and this includes the post 9/11 GI Bill and the associated Yellow Ribbon Program, the Montgomery GI Bill, Chapter 35 for survivors and dependents, as well as the vocational rehabilitation benefits. It's important to note that there is a process for transferring service member benefits to a dependent through the Department of Defense, and dependents in return must apply to the VA to transfer that entitlement to the university. Families as well as student veterans are really encouraged to build a timeline to complete all of these tasks and are welcome to contact our Gonzaga VA benefits team. You can see their contact info on our screen right now. And again, we'll put that into the chat as well. Once a student has confirmed enrollment to the university and registered for classes, that's when benefits will be certified through our VA office each semester.
Thanks, Alexa. So let's dive into a little bit more detail about loans. And again, I just want to remind everyone that loans are a type of financial aid program and very likely will be included in a student's financial aid offer. So students who have financial need as demonstrated by the FAFSA are going to be eligible to borrow the federal direct subsidized loan programs, which is a loan that does not accrue interest while a student's in school. The direct unsubsidized loan program does not require financial need, and all students who are essentially eligible to apply for federal aid can borrow in this program. The direct loans do have annual limits. It's $5,500 for a first-year student, for most first-year students. If borrowing from those programs isn't enough, parents can borrow a Parent Plus loan from the federal loan programs, or the students can borrow from a financial institution like a bank or credit union. Both private loans and Parent Plus loans require a credit check or the absence of negative credit. And we're getting a little bit of ahead of ourselves with this. This is typically something that's tackled later in the financial aid process, as applications for plus and alternative loans aren't going to be available in the spring. Usually in late April is when we start to see those.
Okay, time for our next poll. Is only one FAFSA application is submitted during their student's college education? True or false? Give it some time for those to get entered. Seeing a mixed bag here. Okay, I think we can go ahead and stop sharing that right now. Sarah, do you want to go ahead and reveal the answer?
So yes, absolutely. The answer is that the FAFSA is an annual form. So for most students, they're going to be doing it each year they're in school. There's a few caveats with that that I'll get into as we talk a little bit more about the FAFSA application. So how to apply for federal state need-based aid is really this FAFSA application. The FAFSA stands for Free Application for Federal Student Aid, and it's the form that most colleges, including Gonzaga, are going to require students to fill out to apply for all of those lovely resources that we were talking about. You will want to fill out a FAFSA if the cost of college is in any way a factor in your decision, particularly in the first year. Any student that is going to borrow federal loans while they're in school will also need to do a FAFSA application. So if you're on the fence about it at all, we would really just encourage you to submit that application in their first year. Submitting the FAFSA is really the most important thing you can do if you want financial aid. And then like we mentioned, you're going to need to submit a new FAFSA before each academic year that you want to receive aid. And if you plan to sort of borrow loans and receive aid throughout college, you'll need to do the FAFSA every year. So a little bit about how to apply and the FAFSA timeline. So we are in an interesting year. The form is expected to launch around December 1st. You may or may not be aware that the FAFSA rollout last year did not go great. So my pro tip for you is to maybe considering waiting a week or so after it's launched to submit your application. All signs indicate that it will launch in the next couple of weeks here. I feel as confident as I can, given what we went through last year. But I still think that, given that it's still new technology and new systems often have hiccups, that you can wait a couple days or so before submitting the FAFSA. There's no harm in waiting a week or two after the launch. You're just likely to have a much smoother experience, and just know that you're not missing out by waiting a short while. Financial aid isn't awarded on a first come, first served basis like to that degree. And again, you might be wondering if you should apply, and the answer is yes. Every student should submit the FAFSA application regardless of your family's income level. At Gonzaga, we have a really broad definition of financial need, and many people who think they may not qualify based on high income do qualify for our need-based grants. And particularly at Gonzaga, Alexa will get into some of our financial aid programs. We have a 4-year guarantee for institutional aid. So it's really important in that first year to apply for financial aid and just confirm that you're getting the best possible financial aid offer. I'd also say, don't let the form intimidate you. Most people complete it in under an hour. The FAFSA updates that were launched last year, once we got through the initial heartache of it, the user interface is much better. It's much slicker. And really the hour also includes the time it takes you to track down some documents that you're going to probably need to reference to complete it. If you're anxious to start the FAFSA process, you can do that now by creating an FSA ID. An FSA ID is essentially a verified account where your identity is verified and you have a username and password to use the federal systems. If you're a dependent student, and again, most Gonzaga students are, you're going to be required to provide parent information on the FAFSA, and they will also need a FSA ID. So both the student and one parent usually are going to need an FSA ID. And if the FAFSA goes live in early December as promised, I would expect Gonzaga financial aid offers to be out to students sometime in February. We're really just kind of holding our breath until the FAFSA is launched because that is a huge milestone in us knowing when we're going to be able to have financial aid information out. Do know though that you must be admitted to Gonzaga before you're going to get any sort of financial aid offer. And don't fret, we're intentionally kind of not going into a lot of this really specific details about the FAFSA just yet. One, because it hasn't gone live, and two is that we're going to have more detailed instructions on how to submit the FAFSA at a webinar on December 10th. So mark your calendar for that. So I'm going to turn it over to Alexa to talk about other applications for students who aren't able to submit the FAFSA.
Yes, so there are other aid applications and options for students who are not eligible for federal aid because of immigration status, including being undocumented. So the WASFA is the Washington application for state financial aid, and the WASFA is for students who are ineligible for federal aid, again, due to immigration status or being undocumented. You can start your application by visiting wsac.wa.gov/WASFA. Again, we're going to put that link in the chat. And our deadlines for submitting the WASFA are the same as the FAFSA. So as soon as it's available, you want to submit that, and definitely by February 1st. If you reside outside of the state of Washington, we do have our need analysis form for non-residents of Washington state who can be considered for Gonzaga financial aid. This needs analysis form must be completed and submitted to the financial aid office by emailing it to finaid@gonzaga.edu. And the form only needs to be completed once during the student's enrollment. So another true or false poll here for us. You shouldn't file the FAFSA if you think your family makes too much money. We love it. Seems like everyone is paying attention, which is fantastic. We'll give it a couple more seconds to get those entered, and then now we can end the poll and share. Yes, absolutely. As Sarah mentioned, we really encourage students of all family incomes to submit the FAFSA because, again, at Gonzaga, we kind of have a more expanded definition of financial need, and it's the best way to maximize your financial aid options. So, sending it back to Sarah.
Great, thank you. So some common questions about the specifics of the FAFSA application. So the FAFSA is essentially going to do an assessment of your family's financial situation and ask some questions, in that spirit. So one of the frequently asked questions that we'll get is what investments are excluded? Another way to put this is what investments are included. But so you on the FAFSA do not want to report retirement accounts. So any retirement accounts do not get reported as an asset on the FAFSA. This is one of the most frequently made mistakes that we see in our work. Another thing that you don't need to report is the value of your primary residence or the home that you live in. So the FAFSA is or may ask about assets, but you do not need to include retirement accounts or the value of the home that you live in. Another question is who is considered a parent? And the answer to this is that both legal parents are going to be included on the FAFSA application, regardless of whether or not they're married, if they reside in the same house. If that situation doesn't describe your family, then it would be the parent who provides the most financial support. And if that parent is remarried, it would be the step parent as well. There's a really great graphic that kind of walks you through a few different questions to help get at this question. And also if you have a unique family situation or a family situation where you would want to kind of walk through and make sure that you're getting the right parent information on the FAFSA, that would be a great reason to call our office and let us talk through that with you. The last frequently asked question we get, and maybe this isn't as much of a question as it is, again, a mistake that we see from time to time, is how education benefit plans are reported. So 529 savings plans, Coverdell, they're reported as a refund value. That should be a figure that's readily available in those systems, and that you would only include the student for whom you're doing a FAFSA for that value for them on it. So if you have, savings for 3 students lumped into one savings account, you would essentially take 1/3 of that and report that on the FAFSA application.
Okay, so here's a kind of a great timeline for you to refer to as you are in the application process with us at Gonzaga University. So of course, the first thing on the student's checklist is to prepare your common application or our transfer application and submitting that by the appropriate deadlines. So for students who are applying to GU using our early action deadline, you will receive your admission decision in late December. And students who are applying to Gonzaga using our regular decision deadline will receive their admission decision in early March. From there is when you can really start the financial aid process with the FAFSA or the WASFA form or our needs analysis form. And again, you will have to get your admission decision and be accepted to the university before you're going to get your full financial aid offer. Once your GU application and or FAFSA or WASFA or needs analysis form has been successfully submitted, and again, you are accepted, that's when you'll receive your financial aid offer. So this is really the time once you've received this financial aid offer, that's the time you really want to sit down and plan with a parent or guardian or family members on whether or not Gonzaga is going to be the right fit for you, both overall and of course financially. And then the final step is to be a ZAG. And don't worry, once we have admission decisions out and it's time to make those important decisions, even more information and discernment processes are going to be available to you.
Great. So, of course, we want to cover the costs of attendance and just essentially what the cost. I do want to acknowledge that these are the costs for the current school year, and I've seen at least this question come up a couple times in the Q&A. Tuition historically does go up every year, usually between 3% and 5%, although it's been closer to 3% for the last at least couple of years. So one of the kind of terms that you're going to hear about from all schools, not just Gonzaga, is this idea of a cost of attendance. All schools are required to publish their costs and make that super transparent to students, and Gonzaga is no exception. And it's really important that you have a clear understanding of how much it's going to cost to go to a given school. And while the precise budget amount that your family should prepare for is often difficult to determine exactly, for example, we're using averages here, you can start planning ahead and formulating a budget for some of the possible expenses that might arise. Do know that this cost of attendance that schools are required to publish is an all-inclusive figure. So when we talk about the cost of attendance, we're really referring to 2 different types of costs. There's direct costs, which include tuition and maybe room and meal plans if you're living on campus. And then there's also indirect costs, which we would attribute to items like books, transportation, personal technology, personal expenses, those sorts of things that Gonzaga would not bill you for directly, but they're likely costs that you would incur, if you're living away from home or commuting to and from campus. If you know that you're planning to study abroad, or even if you're thinking about it, you'll also want to prepare for travel costs to and from your program, and that could be a type of cost that goes in the cost of attendance. So as you think about college costs, just be sure to consider some of these items. We have some resources on our website that can assist you with some of the planning. I would also like to plug, maybe one of my colleagues can grab the link and put it in the chat. We have a great net price calculator that kind of takes a look not only at the cost, but also gives you a very rough estimate of what your financial aid eligibility might be based on a few different questions.
So as Sarah kind of hinted to before, at Gonzaga, we guarantee that all Gonzaga institutionally awarded funds upon entry to the university will remain the same and will not decrease for 4 years. So this includes need-based university grants as well as our merit and application-based scholarships. As a Jesuit school, Gonzaga is committed to doing more for others, and all four the forms of financial aid that we have covered today, we work our hardest with families to make Gonzaga a possibility. One step that we've taken is our Gonzaga Access Pledge, or GAP. The Gonzaga Access Pledge awards Pell Grant eligible Washington State residents with an SAI lower than $25,000 who apply as first-year students to have their tuition covered from a combination of federal, state, and institutional financial aid resources. Additionally, Gonzaga also has a deep commitment to leadership, equity, access, and diversity on our campus, and our Unity Scholars Program is a separate application-based scholarship program for Washington State residents. So this grant program offers 4 years covering the cost of tuition, academic fees, housing, and meal plan charges at GU, and offers enrollment into our Bridge pre-orientation program, as well as our 4-year leadership cohort supported by our Unity Multicultural Education Center. So if you are a Washington State resident who has a demonstrated commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging efforts in your community and has high financial need, this would be a really great program, and we encourage you to apply by January 5. So we're going to put a link in the chat now to learn more about the Unity Scholars Program, and hope to see your application to that when you submit it.
So we do want to acknowledge that the FAFSA is going to require, essentially going to assess your family's financial situation based on your 2023 tax information. And we are aware that that might not be an accurate reflection of your family's current financial situation. So we do have a process to take that into account. It's referred to a financial aid appeal or a special circumstances appeal. You can see some of the common requests we receive for appeals up on the screen, and there's a lot more information on our website as well. Because the FAFSA is not launched yet, and we'd also encourage you to wait till you receive your financial aid offer prior to appealing. We're in the process essentially of updating the process. And I expect around January, we'll have the information live or a more accurate timeline once we start receiving financial FAFSA data rolling in. But really the first step before you do anything, before you even think about appealing your financial aid, is we're always going to check to make sure that you've done the FAFSA or WASFA or need analysis application. You've essentially applied for financial aid. And then again, in most cases, we're going to encourage you to wait to receive that financial aid offer. But if you have something that's in a really an exceptional financial hardship, know that in January we'll start having the capacity to review some of those and potentially make some changes on the FAFSA application. So another, I guess, helpful office or another frequently asked questions we get is just about payment options. And I think for many people, this might be getting a little bit ahead of yourself, but I also think it's important, again, in the spirit of transparency, is just to make you aware of what's going to come after the financial aid package. So our student accounts office is responsible for preparing and distributing billing statements for tuition fees, room and board, and other course fees. This office is also going to set up payment plans, disperse financial aid, so essentially apply that financial aid to student accounts, as well as issue refunds for students who are eligible for refunds. And it's really important, and this is we're going to start plugging, checking your emails and making sure you're on top of communications from all of Gonzaga's official channels, but in particular the student accounts office. Our student accounts colleagues are awesome. They're super flexible and love just working with students and helping find solutions. So you're going to have several options to choose from when making payments to Gonzaga. You can obviously pay in full. We bill once per term. There's monthly installment plans. We've covered the PLUS and parent loan, but those are options. And just know that a combination of those can be used as well. I think close to 45% of our students are on monthly installment plans. Parent Plus borrowing is around 15%, and private loan is a little bit less. Usually between 8 and 10% of our students are borrowing private loans. And I share that just to give you a little bit of context for how families are essentially making this work. So just know that we are flexible and committed to help and support you through this process. And with that, I will turn it back over to Alexa.
Yeah, so thank you so much for joining us for tonight's webinar. This kind of concludes the presentation portion, but we have plenty of questions to address in the Q&A, so we're going to go ahead and do that now. And again, please feel free to continue to share those questions in the chat, but remember not to share any personal information. But we're happy to hopefully give you an overview of what the financial aid processes are. So I'm going to go ahead and start asking some of these questions out loud. So Sarah, given some, talk about drastic changes that may or may not be happening with the Department of Education, how would changes in policies affect both the FAFSA as well as Gonzaga specific scholarships or financial aid?
Yeah, thanks, Alexa. And thank you for this question. I appreciate sort of the opportunity to address it. I won't speculate on what will or will not happen. I guess what I will say is that there are a bunch of really dedicated professionals sort of navigating this process, and Gonzaga especially has been through many changes in policy, and it's, gosh, I can't even do the math, but long history, including a lot of stuff in just the last 5 or so years between a global pandemic and the rollout of the FAFSA application last year. So I guess I would encourage you to kind of be paying attention and also trust that there's really great people doing work to ensure that students can continue to be educated at Gonzaga and have the financial aid that they need. I've also worked in this space long enough that policy changes tend to take a long time. So I don't know, again, I won't speculate on what's going to happen, but I do think we'll be given a little bit of a runway to either retool or find other financial aid applications or think about other ways to help students fund their education.
Awesome. Thank you. The next question is, does tuition increase every year? And we did address that earlier. So the answer is yes, tuition does tend to increase each year. Sarah, can you remind us about those percentages, kind of average?
Yeah, I think between 3 and 5% is what it's been historically. It's been closer to 3%, at least for the last couple of years. And what I would probably expand on to say is that we have really great leadership here at Gonzaga who understand the impacts and the sacrifices that families are making to attend Gonzaga. So although tuition does have to increase generally to address, kind of inflationary issues and how much things cost, it is done, thoughtfully and in consideration for what students and families are already kind of paying and sacrificing. So it is unfortunately a reality of kind of the world that we live in. And I also trust our administration to make really student-centered decisions in that area as well.
Awesome. And for students that apply early action and are accepted and then file the FAFSA in December when it's available, what is the estimated timeline on when they might receive their financial aid offer?
So February is what I'll say. I do think we are really crossing our fingers and holding our breath, just because the FAFSA was so rocky last year, that we have a hard time really committing to timelines until we have certainty that not only that the application is available, but that data is being pushed to schools and that our computer systems are ready to accept the data. And then we can make thoughtful and thorough financial aid packages. So historically, February has been around the time that we've been able to release financial aid offers. And so far, indicators point to that being the case. But we will certainly make sure that we're updating our timelines and our expectations once we cross that next milestone, which is really the FAFSA going live here in a couple weeks.
Awesome. That kind of leads to our next question of, we may or may not have an answer to this, but I'm going to ask it anyway. And more information may be available come our December 10 webinar. But can you give an idea of, what some of the backup plans are, or even, what could the timeline, could the shift happen if the FAFSA is not available on December 1st? How does that impact the timeline at Gonzaga
Sure.
for
Yeah, I would say
financial aid and for some of the Gonzaga's application scholarships that are FAFSA dependent, like the alumni scholarship?
yes. So a few things. If the FAFSA, doesn't launch on December 1st, but say launches on December 5th, there will not be an impacted timeline. So there is a little bit of a buffer built in. Particularly, I think December 1st is over the Thanksgiving holiday weekend. So it is unlikely to to launch on a holiday, but who knows? I stopped making predictions about what the Department of Ed will or will not do. So we do have some backup plans for other types of financial aid applications that we can use. Last year, we were able to launch an estimated financial aid offer process. It won't look exactly like it did last year, but do know that we have contingency plans. Our goal would be to not have too much of a disruption to students and that timeline. We understand that finances are going to be a major factor in many people's college decisions and want to get that information out as soon as possible. Should we start to get wind that the FAFSA application is going sideways, we will deploy and communicate extensively. We will update our websites. We will send direct mailings. We will make sure that both admission and financial aid websites are updated with the newest information. I think we have really great tools and a really strong team to communicate effectively should we kind of need to change. So I'd ask that folks anticipate doing the FAFSA and trust that we will get in touch with you if we need to deploy a different type of option. And of course, we really pride ourselves at Gonzaga on our student-centered approach. So whatever delays may happen, I think we're also going to be considering just how that impacts students' timeline as well. And if there's other deadlines and or priority dates that we need to shift, we will consider that. And, you can trust us to make the best decision for the students in that regard.
Awesome. Thank you. So now with the family discount for students or families that have maybe twins, so not only just multiple siblings, but actual twins, does only one student receive that 10% sibling discount?
It's kind of up to the family. We typically give 5% to each sibling. So one student gets 10% or the family gets 10% off of one tuition is kind of, we can put it, but we can do the math lots of different ways. Sometimes it's more beneficial for one student to receive it and another. It might depend on, one student having more outside scholarships or one student being eligible for need-based loans, but know that we'll work with you. It's not a hard and fast rule about which of the siblings gets to receive it.
Awesome. And do the monthly payment plans incur interest charges?
There is a one-time fee, but they do not incur interest if the payments are made on time.
Awesome. And can you just give an overview a little bit more about what the Parent Plus loans and how they work?
Yeah, absolutely. So Parent Plus loan is a loan that parents can borrow on behalf of their students. The parent is either the biological parent or the parent on the FAFSA, or if the step parent is on the FAFSA, they could borrow as well. We would recommend that the student borrow their eligibility first, which I mentioned, I think for most students is going to be around $5,500 in their first year. Those tend to have better interest rate. Is also a loan in the student's name, and they're going to be the primary benefactor of the education that they're paying for. So the Parent Plus loans are, again, we think of as just a payment option once all the other financial aid resources have been exhausted. A Parent Plus loan is through the Department of Education. It is based on the absence of negative credit, so it's a little bit different than a traditional credit check. Like if you were to go do a car loan, it's kind of a yes, no, you're either approved or you're not. And so because of that credit check, the application isn't available until April. If you are approved, you can essentially borrow up to the cost of attendance. So the idea is that you could borrow every dollar that you might need to cover it. Of course, we'd encourage families to only borrow what they need. So while you might be approved for a very high amount, you can adjust that downward. You can also be making payments while your student is in school. The first repayment would kind of kick in, I think 60 days after disbursement. So that would be, a couple months into the start of the student's education. So I think I got a lot of the high points there, but we can share more information, and or if you want more specifics and want more information about that credit check and what that might entail, another great reason to get in touch with our office, and we'd be happy to help.
Awesome. Thank you. There no large scholarships to apply for non-Washington state residents. So we don't have any full tuition or full cost scholarships or programs for folks outside of the state of Washington. There are still great scholarships available to those out-of-state students. Again, our academic merit scholarships that all students are automatically reviewed for. And then in addition to that, there are those other scholarships that we review students for, sometimes based on academic interests, like in business or involvement in leadership and service. We also have our honors program, and all of those scholarship opportunities do stack on top of each other. And then separately, students will be evaluated for need-based aid. So that would be like Gonzaga grants or any other federal or state aid that they might be eligible for. And again, that kind of goes into the full comprehensive financial aid offer. Sarah, any other resources that I might have missed for out-of-state students?
No, I just want to add, I think the median for a Gonzaga grant for first year students was close to $9,000 last year. So median being the midpoint, meaning half of the students that received the Gonzaga grant were above that amount and half were below. So again, just a plug for the FAFSA. If cost is a factor, you might be pleasantly surprised by how much your family qualifies for, especially at a school like Gonzaga, where we have a really robust definition of need and funding for need-based grants as well.
So we have a question about if a student put on the common application that they were not going to apply for need-based financial aid or file the FAFSA, can they still submit the FAFSA later on? Absolutely. Whatever students put on the common app, we are not beholden to. So regardless of how a student may have indicated that on the FAFSA or on the common app, know that you can always still submit the FAFSA. We will not hold that against them. And we, again, encourage all students to submit that FAFSA if they are able to. We have another question. Can you explain more what refund value means when with the 529 plan and reporting that on the FAFSA?
Yeah, absolutely. So in Washington, we have what's called the GET program, which is guaranteed tuition, and families often buy credits. Like 20 years ago, you could have bought credits at whatever University of Washington's tuition rate is, and you can cash them out at the value of whatever tuition is now, or at least that's a general idea of how some of these education plans work. So some families do not know the dollar amount, or the dollar amount is less obvious because they just purchased credits. And so the refund value is essentially that those credits translated to a monetary value. Any 529 or Coverdell or any of the other common education plans that should be relatively accessible in your portal. If the plan that your student or that you have college savings in, I didn't mention it. Again, you can give us a call. We have lots of folks, particularly on the student account side, who work with many plans and probably could help you navigate the portal to find that. So if you already have a dollar amount assigned, like I know the college savings plans that we have in our family, just it's dollars and it's like an investment. It's essentially that value. So the refund value is more referring to those plans where you were pre-purchasing college tuition credits. And even if you purchase tuition credits like in that GET program for Washington, even if you purchase those based on the rate of the public school, those can be transferred to any school to be used, and they work essentially just like cash.
Awesome. Thank you. Do funds that are left to a child in a trust or will need to be included on the FAFSA?
Ooh, that's a good question. I would say probably, but it might depend. I might need to know a little bit more information. And again, this is probably a better conversation with someone specifically in our office. It might depend a little bit on how the trust or will is set up. That also might be something that we at Gonzaga would take into consideration through an appeal process, particularly if it's a one-time income. So I'd encourage that family to reach out to our office. I will also plug that the FAFSA, as you go through the FAFSA, there's lots of great help text. One of the things that really improved is just the user interface and how easy it is to navigate it and kind of get better answers to questions more quickly. So as you're going through the FAFSA, if you have, unique financial situations, I would encourage you to leverage that help text that's just built in the application itself.
If a student has submitted a CSS profile to Gonzaga, does that impact their financial aid response time for an offer?
It will not. So if you've done a profile, thank you. And we'll also ask you to do a FAFSA application just because that's going to be the ticket to eligibility for federal and state financial aid. For the students who, the small handful of students who've done a profile is not something that Gonzaga requires, except for a small population of students that we will directly inform that they need to submit it. And if you do a profile, once the FAFSA goes live, you'll probably get a nice reminder from us that you should also do the FAFSA as well. But presumably the output from the profile and the output from the FAFSA are going to be the same thing. They would qualify you for the same amount of aid. And if we have questions or we have conflicting information, we would follow up and make sure we fully understand what your family's financial situation is.
I think we've gotten to most of them or all of them for now. But again, we have a couple more moments. So if you have any lingering questions, please feel free to put those in the Q&A now. But I just want to plug in again to please check out all of our in-person and virtual visit options for Gonzaga. As a reminder, we are hosting our How to Submit the FAFSA webinar on December 10th. I will ask my colleagues to put the links in the chat on how to register for that webinar, as well as any other visits that you might be interested in. As well as the contact information for your admission counselor and our financial aid office. As we've said multiple times throughout this webinar, we are always here to help every student and every family. So please never hesitate to reach out to either of our offices. And we are happy to help and support you in that. But with that, it looks like we are all set. So thank you so much for attending. Huge thank you to Sarah Everett, Helen, and Shaylin in our financial aid office for joining us, as well as to Levi and Sarah, my colleagues that were helpful in the chat and answering all of your questions. We hope you have a great rest of your evening. And again, don't be a stranger. We are here to answer any and all questions that you have and make this process as easy and transparent as we possibly can. So have a great evening, everyone.